Good afternoon to the Japanese audience and good morning to the European attendees. I'm Judita Rica-Magyar, country representative for Euroscience Japan. This is the MSCA Postdoctoral Fellowships 2026 info session. And this webinar focuses on the Marie Skłodowska-Curie Actions Postdoctoral Fellowships, a mobility scheme that targets researchers who are holding a PhD degree and wish to acquire new skills, develop their career, while carrying out their research activities abroad. This grant helps academics gain experience in various disciplines, non-academic sectors, and countries. Those interested in a postdoc in Europe or anywhere in the world are welcome to take advantage of this opportunity to learn about the ins and outs of this program, which will be explained by an expert, and then you will hear a first-hand testimony from a Japanese alumnus and get answers via an interactive Q&A session. So let's proceed with our webinar. I would like to welcome Raquel Metzomer-Guizo, who is MSCA National Contact Point in the UK at the UK Research and Innovation, and the title of her presentation is MSCA Postdoctoral Fellowships 2026 call.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you very much for being here today. As Judith said, I'm the national contact point for the Marie Skłodowska-Curie Actions in the UK. And today I will be providing you with an overview of the MSCA actions. I will include in the eligibility criteria, the submission and evaluation process, as well as some resources and timelines that might be helpful when it comes to prepare your application. So MSCA, I don't know how familiar you are about the scheme, but I will start from the very, very beginning. So the Marie Skłodowska-Curie Actions are part of Horizon Europe, which is the European key funding program for research and innovation. It lasts for 7 years, so it started in 2021 and it finishes in 2027. And it has a budget of 95.5 billion euros. Of which 7% go to the MSCA actions. Since the launch in 1996, the MSCA has become the European reference program for doctoral education and postdoctoral training, like the session that we're here to listen today. To put this into context, in Horizon 2020, which was the previous framework program for research and innovation that went from 2014 to 2020, the MSCA supported 65,000 researchers in Europe and beyond and funded over 1,000 excellent international doctoral networks. Some of the key features of the MSCA actions in general, not just the postdoctoral fellowship, is they fund excellent research in all areas and disciplines. So it could be from physical sciences to social sciences and engineering. So there are no predefined priorities. So the researcher, you as a researcher, can define your own topic of research, and it covers all areas of research and innovation. The aim is to enhance the skills of the people behind the research and innovation through excellent training. You will hear me to say that a few times through the presentation, excellent training, and equip them with the necessary skills and international experience. It encourages researchers to move not only between countries, but also between sectors, disciplines to acquire new skills. It offers attractive working and employment conditions that align with the European Charter for Researcher. It provides top training, career guidance and supervision, and it promotes equal and inclusive opportunities. It has a structuring impact on organization, increasing the global attractiveness, the visibility and the reputation, as well as strengthening the research and innovation capacity and transfer of knowledge. It promotes a structural partnership between universities, research institutions, companies, and SMEs. There are several actions within the MSCA family. I will briefly go through all of them, but the focus of today is the postdoctoral fellowship. So the doctoral network supports doctoral programs developed by universities, research institutions, and research infrastructure, business, and other socioeconomical actors from different countries across Europe and beyond. The session that we'll be focusing today is the Postdoctoral Fellowship, which enhance the creative and innovative potential of researchers holding a PhD. And they want to acquire new skills through training, international, intersectoral, and interdisciplinary mobility. The staff exchanges, which promotes innovative, international, intersectoral, and interdisciplinary collaboration, research, and innovation through exchanging staff and sharing knowledge and ideas. And then we have the co-fund, which is a co-fund mechanism to fund new or existing national, regional, or international doctoral programs and postdoctoral fellowship schemes. And the aim of that is to spread the best practice of the MSCA, including the training and the international and cross-sectoral mobility of researchers. Then we have the MSCA and Citizens, which aims to bring the research and the researchers closer to the public, to increase awareness of research and the innovation activities. And last but not least is the Choose Europe for Science, which aims to increase the attractiveness of the European research career by addressing the issue of precarity and offering excellent working conditions. As you can see, the only call that is open is the Postdoctoral Fellowship, which is the scheme that we'll be focusing on today. So let's start with the MSCA Postdoctoral Fellowship. So the MSCA Postdoctoral Fellowship, as I said, is open to all research fields without pre-described research priorities. The program operates on a bottom-up approach. You will see that in the work programs, in the different documents available, which allows researchers to choose any research area that they wish to explore. The fellowship, it can last between 12 to 36 months, depending on the type of fellowship. And we'll see that in the next slides, how many types we have, or how many you can choose from. And then enhance the creative and innovative potential of PhD holding researchers through advanced training and international, interdisciplinary, and intersectoral mobility. That's the 3 I's as is best known in the field. All fellowship can include short stays, research trips, fieldwork, secondments, and non-academic placement. All of those are optionals and they need to make sense for the project that you are proposing. And the fellows can be recruited, so you can do your fellowship either in the academic or in the non-academic sector. So as I said earlier on, there are 2 types. It's one program, but there are 2 types of fellowships. So the European Postdoctoral Fellowship are open to researchers of any nationality, either coming to Europe from any country in the world, such as Japan, or moving within Europe. The duration of those must be between 12 and 24 months. So it could be someone coming from Japan to any country in Europe or associated country, or anyone coming within Europe to another European country. And then we have the Global Fellowship, which are open to European nationals or long-term residents going to an organization outside the EU member state and Horizon Europe associated country. And those fellowships have 2 phases. One phase is the outgoing phase. So somebody that is already based in a European country goes to, let's say, Japan for 12 to 24 months. And then there is a mandatory return phase to any country in Europe for 12 months. So those are the 2 types, and based on where you are, it's likely that the one that you will be interested in applying, it will be the European Fellowship. So the project, the main thing to remember is the training through research. So the project should address 2 things. One is to have a very clear research question. So you need to question how novel is your project versus the state of the art. And you need to have very clear and well-defined research objectives. And then what sort of training needs you have and how the project will enable you to achieve those. It will enhance your employability, your competencies as a researcher. They need to be very realistic and very well defined to advance your career. So imagine those training needs will enable you to achieve your career objectives. As I briefly mentioned on my previous 2 slides, the projects can have during the MSCA projects, which is 12 to 24 months for the European one, European Fellowship, and 24 to 36 months for the Global Fellowship. You can include secondments, short stays, and non-academic placements, provided that they fit with their project objectives and they add value to that. All of those are optionals, and people will not be penalized, or you as an applicant won't be penalized for not including them. So the secondments, as I said, they're optional, but they must be in line with the project objectives and the training need of the research. The maximum duration of those is half of the fellowship duration. So let's say in a 24 months fellowship, you can go on a secondment for 12 months. That's the maximum duration. It could be 3 lots of 4 months, or it could be, you can split them, you can arrange them as you like. They must outline the clear supervisory arrangement. So you need to have a supervisor wherever you're going, and they need to add significant value and impact to the fellowship. They could be anywhere in the world. Let's say that you apply with an institution located in the UK, and you want to do a secondment for 6 months in Japan because that fits with your project idea. That's perfectly fine. And it can take place at any time. It could be halfway through your fellowship. It could be at the end of the fellowship. It could be at the beginning, but it needs to make sense for the project. You need to plan that in advance and include it in your proposal. When you submit your proposal on the 9th of September, you need to include that information there. But the organization doesn't need to be named at that stage. One thing to mention, it doesn't extend the duration of the fellowship, and the cost of that can be covered under the research, training, and networking costs, and we'll see that splits shortly. So for the European Fellowship, they can take any time during the fellowship. For the global one, for the Global Fellowship, only during the outgoing phase. So any time, but only during the outgoing phase. And the duration, as I said, is half of the fellowship duration. And for the Global Fellowship is half of the outgoing phase. I'm just going through each of those because it raises a lot of questions. What is a secondment? What makes or what classes as a short stay, and what classes as a non-academic placement? It's just to make sure that it's clear and makes sense. But if at any point after my presentation you got any questions, please feel free to raise those in the chat or asking the question. So short stay, so they can be research visit, archive visits, field work, etc. They're optional, but again, they must be in line with the project objectives and the training need of the research. You don't need to have a supervisor, and normally the supervisor at your host institution will remain while you're on a short stay. They don't have a defined duration, but normally represents a small part of the action. It could be between 1 week to 1 month, 2 months maximum. But if you have anything that lasts for 6 months, normally it classes as a secondment. Again, can take place anywhere in the world, including third country, and at any time of the fellowship duration. They can be planned in advance, or they can be planned while you're doing your projects, but they must always be in line with the research and training needs of the fellow. It doesn't extend, again, the fellowship duration, and the cost can be covered by the research, training, and networking cost. Last but not least, it comes the non-academic sector placement. Those ones are additional period at the end of your fellowship. So if you're doing a 24 months fellowship, this one will be an additional 6 months, extending the duration of your fellowship to 30 months. Again, those are optionals, but you need to have a clear supervisory arrangement. They really need to add value for the project and the career development of the researcher. And the host institution must be located in an EU member state or Horizon Europe associated country. For the other two, they could be anywhere in the world. For the non-academic placement, you need to remain in Europe or any other Horizon Europe associated country. For the fellows recruited at the non-academic organization, the placement, of course, needs to take a different non-academic host organization. You can't stay where you are, and extends the fellowship duration, and also the funding is extended. You get a 6 months, 6 additional months of funding. And if the non-academic placement is declared ineligible because it classes as a comment or as a short visit, the proposal will still be evaluated without taking that into consideration. So moving on, eligibility criteria. So what you need to be eligible to apply to that one. So for the European Fellowship, there are no nationality requirements. For the Global Postdoctoral Fellowship, you must be an EU national or a long-term resident on a member state or associated country. You must be in possession of a doctoral degree or have successfully defended your doctoral thesis. If your Viva or PhD defense is after the call deadline, which this year is the 9th of September 2026, you will need to wait until the following year to apply. You need to have a maximum of 8 years of full-time equivalent research experience, but this limit can be extended for like maternity leave, which you get an extension of 18 months, paternity leave, which you get the exact duration per child born after the PhD award day, compulsory national service, time is spent not working in research. So if you've been working in industry for the last few years, and you haven't been involved in R&D activities, long-term sick leave, so more than 30 days, all those things can be deducted. And very important is the mobility rule. This is a mobility scheme, so you can't really have resided or carried out your main activity, which are work, studies, in the country of the host institution for the European Fellowship, or the host of the outgoing phase for a global fellowship for more than 12 months within the last 3 years. So going back, so is the 9th of September, 3 years prior, you can have lived or resided for more than 12 months in the country that you're applying with. And this year, there is a resubmission restriction of 80%. So if you apply last year and you want to resubmit, the threshold is 80%. So you need to have scored at least 80%. So the researchers, that's you. So is that the right fit? So things that you need to question yourself. Do you have the potential to reach or reinforce professional maturity and independence during the fellowship? Are you able to clearly demonstrate your experience and your competencies and the skills? Do you have the Remember that your track record is evaluated against other researchers in the same career stage, discipline, and sector. You need to think, what are your future career prospects? What are you going to achieve with this fellowship? Do you have clear scientific and training goals? How will you be integrated into the team or the institution that you are applying with? And what knowledge are you bringing and what will be gained during the project? It's a two-way knowledge. So you will bring knowledge to your host institution and you will gain knowledge from your supervisor for your team, from the institution that you will be applying with. And then it comes the host organization. So the host organization is the beneficiary of your project. So it's the host of the European Fellowship, and the return phase of the Global Fellowship must be located in a member state or associated country, any legal entity within or outside academia, and recruits the postdoctoral researcher. That means you. And then it's the associated partner who hosts the outgoing phase of the Global Fellowship, the secondments and placement host, any legal entity within or outside academia, and they can be located, we saw before, they can be located anywhere in the world. Now, the host institution, questions that you can ask yourself: why are the best place to undertake your projects? Do they have the necessary skills and experience to help meet the project objectives? You need to look beyond the potential of the supervisor. It's also the department, the infrastructure, the institution matters as well. How will you be integrated into the institution? Your institution needs to be aware of the submission. We've seen proposals that go a few days before the deadline to they approach the supervisor. It's very important that you work closely with your colleagues, but also with your supervisor to avoid any surprises, not only during the proposal preparation stage, but also during the implementation of the project. And another key element of a MSCA Postdoctoral Fellowship is the supervisor. The supervisor main role is to provide research, guidance, and mentoring and support you as the fellow to integrate and to support your career development. You need to question whether they have the right level of supervision, depending on the career stage that you and the other person is, and the expectation of the projects. The best proposals that we've seen is where the supervisor has an active role in the development of the proposal. You can also have junior supervisors, and then you can have mentors in place to support the supervisor, but you need to justify their involvement. It can build on an existing collaboration. So if you're already working with colleagues in Europe and you want them to be your supervisor, you can do that as well, but you need to justify that in the application, in the excellent part of the application. Supervisors need to be committed and involved for the full duration. They can't be involved just for the first 3 months. It's for the full duration of your fellowship. So remember that the supervisor and the supervisor is a researcher whose expertise, mentoring, track record, and institutional support aligns with your project, specific project objectives and your current career stage. You need to think when it comes to prepare your proposal, how the supervision will work on a day-to-day basis. Will you have regular one-to-ones or group and lab meetings on a weekly basis? Will you have an open door policy? All those things matter. Also important to remember that you will need to submit a career development plan. Is a mandatory deliverable by month 6. So where will you include in detail what you're planning to do in the next 12 to 24 months? As I said, you can have, it's only one primary supervisor for each host organization, but you can have additional cost supervisors and mentors, but they need to be described in the narrative form of the proposal. Other things to remember is the gender and the gender dimension of your research, how you're going to incorporate those in your proposal. Open science and open science practices, so how you're going to publish the results of your research, the dissemination, the exploitation and communication plans. Public engagement, how you're going to make your research accessible to the public, and what sort of impact your project will have, not only in your scientific field, but also for the society, for the economy, for the environment. And how will you be integrated into the institution that you are arriving to? The budget. So the MSCA Postdoctoral Fellowships works on a monthly unit contribution, so it's a flat rate. You don't need to do any calculation when it comes to budget. You will receive exactly the same every month, and your institution will receive exactly the same every month. So in this case, it's the living allowance, the mobility allowance, and if applicable, if you have any family dependents or any dependents, and then you will be eligible to claim family allowance, and that constitutes the gross salary of the recruited MSCA Postdoctoral Fellow. Those are subject to deduction, so national taxes and contributions, as well as employer and employee contributions. And then you have the institutional unit contribution per person month, so is the research, training and networking contributions. Those can cover the costs related to the training, the career development, and the research of the postdoctoral fellowship. That includes any visa costs, any traveling on secondments, or any traveling on short stay, etc. And then the management and indirect contributions. So that covers the general costs of hosting your fellowship, so any costs that are generated to the host institution, in other words, the overheads. Few things to consider when it comes to finance. The finance are managed by the host institution according to the usual internal policies. So your host institution will receive the funding and organize payments for your monthly payments as a fellow. The living allowance, mobility allowance, and family allowance are subject, and we already covered that, subject to all national deduction. Institutions are strongly advised to explain how the salary will be calculated, what sort of taxes. It varies from country to country, so it's important that you're clear right from the beginning how much will you be receiving a month, so you understand and it's clear for you. RTN, or research, training and networking, are the costs related to professional activities. It could be traveling to do your secondments, your short visits, etc. Family, long-term leave and a special needs allowance can be requested when, if needs arises halfway through the fellowship, you as a fellow acquire family responsibilities, then you can claim that halfway through the fellowship. It doesn't have to be right at the beginning. The management and indirect contributions at the general cost of the host institutions. And if, for example, you're going on a secondment to, let's say you're based in the UK and you're going on a secondment to Japan for 3 months, your institution in the UK can redistribute some funds to the Japanese institution to cover the costs associated with your secondment. Another thing to bear in mind is the different currencies. So depending which country you choose to be hosted by, some institutions can apply a conservative exchange rate to, and then whatever is left will be paid at the end of or throughout your fellowship. The submission process, I will be a bit quicker in this section, just conscious of time. So I will skip through some of the slides, but I will be sharing the presentation with you later. But just to give you an idea, so the first thing, it will be to register and create an account on the EU Funding and Tenders portal. This is what it looks like, is a screenshot of the page. It's important that you familiarize yourself with all the documents available, and there is a link to the course, so you can go there and the documents, you will find all the information available. Contact your host institution. One is to discuss how you're going to prepare the submission together, talk to your supervisor, and also to help you through the submission process. And then you can start an application on the system. You can submit as many times as you like. Just see it as a little folder where you put your drafts in there, and then you can submit. Only the last submission will be saved and received by the European Commission. So if you submit now and tomorrow and the day after, only the last submission will be saved in the system. So use it as a way to save your proposal and edit it. As I say, I will be skipping through some of those slides, but I will be sharing the slides with you later on, but it shows you the steps by steps through the portals. But one thing I want to cover is this section. So the proposal is made of 3 sections. So the part A is the administrative part of the proposal, where you will find the title, the abstract, information about your beneficiary or the host institution, information is from you as the researcher, and information about the supervisor. And then it will include a budget table where you put is a flat rate. So the minute that you put the number of months and also the country, it will calculate that information automatically for you. And also has information about the gender, the ethics. So if there is any information that is worth mentioning there, it will be included in the part A, which is completed online and is an administrative form on the project. Then it comes the part B1 and the part B2. So the part B1 is the main part of your proposal. It has 3 sections, which is the core of your proposal. So it's divided in excellent, impact, and the quality and efficiency of the implementation. The maximum length is 10 pages of A4 size documents. And it's very important that you respect the instructions when it comes to margin, the font size, etc. And then it comes the Power B2. There are two separate. You download it as one, you complete it offline, and then you upload it to the system. You need to upload it as two different documents, Power B1 and Power B2. Power B2 is the section 4 to 9, and it includes the researcher's CV, any explanation on the ethics, information about the participating organizations. So if you're going to do a secondment anywhere in the world, you will include information about them in there. Any environmental considerations, all of that, AI, you will include that in there. There is no limit in terms of pages, so you can include as many pages, but do not include any additional information that you're not required, because it will be disregarded. And if you're applying for a global fellowship, the letter of commitment will need to be included as part of your Part B2. The evaluation process, I will be very quick on this one too, but again, I will be sharing the slides afterwards. So once that you press submit and the call closes on the 9th of September, the REA, which is the European Research Executive Agency, will automatically pre-allocate 3 evaluators based on your keywords. That's why it's very important to include the right level of keywords. And then the scores of the proposals will be evaluated from 5, which is excellent, to 0, which is fails. And then the scores and the comments are based on a consensus of the evaluators. One thing to mention, sometimes when the REA allocate evaluators, they might decide to reject the allocation if it's outside their expertise or there is a conflict of interest. The evaluators are from different nationalities to make sure that there are no bias. And then there are rapporteurs, which are experienced evaluators. And sometimes when it's an interdisciplinary proposals that is in the boundary of few fields, additional evaluators might be included. This is the evaluation criteria. As you can see, it coincides with the core part of your proposal. So you have the excellent part, the impact part, the quality and efficiency of the implementation. They have different weights on the proposal. So the excellence is 50%, the impact is 30%, and the quality and efficiency of the implementation is 20%. All the information about the evaluation criteria is in the MSCA Word program, and I will highly recommend you to read that information in there. I will give you a list of all the documents that you should be considering and reading when preparing your application. Minimum threshold for all of them is 3. So if you score less than 3 on any of those sections, your proposal will be automatically declared unfunded. Make sure that you use a clear language, make it easier for the evaluators. Do not change the structure of the proposal. That's very important. The evaluators get really annoyed when people start changing things around. The proposal is well structured, it's very clear, easy to follow. So please make sure you adhere to the guidance. I won't go through that in detail, but I will leave it with you to read through at your time. Resources and timeline. So the call is now open. As I said, deadline is the 9th of September 2026, and the close at 5 p.m. Brussels time. The proposals will be informed of the outcome in February 2027. The grant agreement will be signed in April, or the first grant agreements will be signed in April 2027. And the prospective start date is from May 2027. By saying that, the latest that you can start is September the following year. So that will be 1st of September 2028. Submit early and as often as you can. Resources, there is a whole list of resources. Particular emphasis I will put on the MSCA Word Program 2026-2027. I will also put some emphasis on the guide for applicants. It explains what each section should cover. And I will also put some emphasis on the financial guide. All of those documents explain what is included, the information that you need to put in there. I know there is a lot of information available, but it's important that you read that through to understand what the scheme has to offer. And with that, thank you very much for listening. Sorry if I've gone slightly over the time, but I hope that was useful. And if you've got any questions, happy to take those at the end, or if you can email me here, I'll be happy to take those later. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Raquel. That was very extensive and very informative. And there are already some questions in the Q&A box. We will answer them live right after this testimonial. Shuntaro Yamada, who is Postdoctoral Fellow at Tissue Engineering Group at the Center of Transnational Oral Research, Department of Clinical Dentistry at the University of Bergen. The title of his presentation is Strategies and Challenges in Preparing an MSCA-PF Application, My Journey with AO Research Institute, Davos.
Thank you very much for kind introduction, and I'm very glad to speak to you today. And then I am now the postdoctoral fellow at the University of Bergen in Norway, and also I am the recipient of Marie Curie Postdoctoral Fellowship hosted by the AO Research Institute Davos in Switzerland. I'm actually starting my Marie Curie Fellowship in coming September. Today, I would like to share some of the tips and the hints for writing application through my own experience, and also try to help you writing and also thinking about the application for your future applications. Before starting, I'd like to introduce myself a little bit. So I am a dentist. I graduated as a dentist back in 2013. And then later, I moved to Sweden for my oral surgery training to improve my hands-on skill. And that time, I met quite a few pioneering researchers in dental sciences. And one of them was actually the leading researcher in the field called regenerative dentistry. And so I decided to leave my oral surgery training, and instead I joined the Master of Science program at King's College London. Afterwards, I joined the PhD program in Norway. It's a PhD program in tissue engineering, and then I finished my PhD degree in 2023. Last September, I applied the Marie Curie Postdoctoral Fellowship. It's a European fellowship hosted by the AO Research Institute Davos in Switzerland. And very luckily, our proposal was funded, and so I'm starting my fellowship in September. So just a very quick introduction of my project. For those who are not in a dental or dentist field, my main focus is to regenerate a bone, particularly in the oral and the craniofacial area. So by combining cells, also advanced manufacturing technologies such as 3D printing or bioreactive technologies to develop the functional bone implant. And then this is the project for the next 2 years after the summer. I think most of you are now interested in application, and especially my personal experience in writing and applying the applications. So my journey for application actually started in May 2025, so which is basically exactly a year ago. At that time, there was some advertisement from the AO Research Institute for internal selection. So I applied, and then showing my interest in applying the Marie Curie Fellowship. And then after 2 months, they came back to me and then giving me a notification of intention to support my application. And then, as you know, the deadline for the Marie Curie Fellowship is usually in September, and therefore that meant I had only 2 months for application. And even worse, actually, at that time, I was also responsible for other applications. It's a European Horizon Program, Innovation Action. Actually, the 55 pages in total with the 14 consortium members. And then unfortunately, the due was the same date. Well, not same date, but basically the same timing. And then very luckily, basically, I got both project funded. And then so I'm moving to Switzerland as a Marie Curie Fellowship, but also I am still involving in this new grant, the Horizon Europe grant called the Biofactory project, also starting in September. So that actually made my life quite difficult, but I think we are managing it quite well now. When I was given the notification for internal selection, this is the email actually I was given from my host, the AO Institute in Davos. So as you can see, the first draft was requested by 30th of July, so which is basically almost a month and a half before the deadline. And this basically give you the idea that how short I had to apply. And that actually made my life quite challenging. And then so I'm now looking back, I was very fortunate to make this successful. And also the host, they do have quite a lot of experience on hosting Marie Curie Fellowship. So basically they also provided me quite a lot of list of reading YouTube videos or the guidebooks and so on to help me understanding the application processes and also that basically that what to write, what is expected by the European Commission. So the first thing I think you need to do is, of course, to look for your host. And then there are a number of ways you can look for the host. Of course, if you have already the contact or if you know already the group you want to join, I think the best and maybe the straightforward approach is you just send an email and then ask whether they can host or support application or not. My case, I basically used two main resources. The one is the social media, mostly LinkedIn, and also I also use the EuroAccess website. You can actually find quite a few advertisements from different universities across Europe. It's not a job advertisement, but looking for the candidates or potential applicants for Marie Curie fellowship, and then so you can basically get the connection with them, and then express your interest in application, and then also express whether they can uh, express your interest of knowing whether they can actually support or not. So I think these are quite useful resources. I believe you can also check later. But as I said, if you have already the connection, I think this is maybe the fastest way you can go. So for my case, I basically had almost 2 to 3 weeks of writing. It's quite short, and then also 1 month of back and forth feedback and refinement. And then as you can also imagine, this is the mid of summer vacation time, and then so there was some logistic challenges in developing the program. But at the same time, I did have a research idea at the time. And then so my job or my task was pretty much to find the perfect matching host, but not really the finding the research idea or developing the research idea. So that maybe made my application much easier. I knew what I would like to do, but I just needed to find the best host. I think if your project doesn't quite match the host expertise, then probably you would need more time. So I just give you some tip. So this is my evaluation summary report. I luckily got 99% out of 100% and then so funded. And as you know, the evaluation criteria is grouped into 3 different categories. The one, excellence, the other, impact, and then also the implementation. For you, if you're not quite familiar with European grant system, or at least the Horizon Europe application, I think knowing their terminology is really the first thing. So probably some of you maybe have even no idea what is excellence, impact, implementation. I think it's very typical that you tend to mix up with these. Sometimes you mention your methodology in excellence and then you repeat the same method in implementation, which is a very common mistake. But if you don't really know what is the difference, of course, it's very difficult to write a grant application. So I think my first advice is to know the EU terminology. What is output? What is outcome? There are lots of the unfamiliar terminology, I would say, for the young applicants. And then the next thing, of course, you need to know the evaluation criteria. And then I think the best practice is to just go to the template, because the template gives you some instruction, and then instruction tells you what the reviewer is looking for. So the template is very good guidance for you. But of course, also your host institute can support you, providing a lot of different resources to read and then also watch, and that will really help you understand evaluation criteria. And then you tailor your heading and subheading. One of the big challenges for me was, of course, the page limit. There's only 10 pages, very limited pages number compared to the other application. And then so, but still you are almost, it's mandatory to cover the European kind of evaluators expectation. And my recommendation is to touch at least everything they are expecting. If you don't mention, they consider you are not aware of. But if you at least mention, even with just 1 or 2 lines, that basically gives them the sign that you know what they are expecting. So that includes ethical consideration, gender dimension, data management, risk management, mitigation, and so on. It's not necessarily directly linked to your science, but very important to include in the application. And then the next point is the Marie Curie Fellowship is not just about research quality. It's about training. It's about the career development. It's about the mobility. So just make sure you're not just focusing on the science quality, but also to mention how the program can develop yourself. So I think these 3 points are the one you should always think about. Of course, through your project, you should advance your research, creating new knowledge for science community. But it's not just about the science. The molecule really supports your development in your own academic career. So maybe through your project, you can expand your network, you can develop your leadership, independence, or management skills. Of course, you can get the new skills, knowledge, and experiences, which helps you to develop further in the future. And of course, make sure you also contribute to the host. It must be some give and take, a mutual benefit interaction relationship, rather than you are receiving everything from the host. That's, I think, very important to consider. And then this is the last tip, basically. Now, as you know, there are quite a few applications, and then I think now the number of applications are skyrocketing. And this is basically because of the AI and also the geopolitical factors. So especially with the AI, it is actually quite easy to develop a feasible, also realistic, but also still groundbreaking research. But what we as applicant need to show is that the project that you are proposing is actually be done. And then this kind of thing is not something you can develop for the short time. You really need to personalize your application from mostly from your own long-term effort, and then to show you are really developing your project, you can do the project on time, and then the program really help you grow. So it can be publication, preprint, preliminary data. You should really include this. But also, if you have any award or history of collaboration or leadership supervision experience or communication dissemination activities, this really helps. So just one or a few example. So for example, I included the references mostly based on my own researches. And then I really try to include as many research paper I published before as possible in the application so that to demonstrate I am able to carry out the research. But of course, also the references with the blue line are the paper from the host institute. And then so basically we need to show that the project is not just my project, but also the host expertise come in a big significant role. The other part is just example. For example, you need to mention how you disseminate or communicate your research. But then it's very typical that everybody talk about let's say we are going to attend the conferences, we are publishing 1 or 2 papers, and so on. It is very difficult to make you stand out from others. They basically write the same thing, but the reviewer want to know why you need to be selected rather than the others. So you really need to personalize it. And this is my approaches. So luckily I had my social media account, and then Through my social media account, I had actually the 15,000 followers. And then because of this, I was invited to webinars, podcasts, or even the TV TV media, and also the newspapers, as well as some pictures featured by Nature. And then I included this in my CV part to make my dissemination and communication plans more feasible and more personalized. So the last thing, I think, but even I mentioned quite a few things. I think the only thing you need to remember is these sentences. You want to demonstrate, I cannot do the proposal work now, but expertise and the support from the host will allow me to grow and then do the good research and of course benefit the host or the Europe. I think the Marie Curie really give you opportunity to expand the network and then also open up your future career. So I really do encourage you to apply Marie Curie Fellowship. Thank you very much for your attention.
And that was the presentation by Shuntaro Yamada. If you have any questions to him, I will be happy to relay the query. Please send them by email. And let's start with the first. Would it be considered an advantage in the evaluation if I have a clear plan to continue my career in the EU after the funding? Also, would participating in a non-academic project make the application stronger in the evaluation?
So you need to think of your career stage and what this fellowship will enable you. So what are your gaps in terms of training, career development, and what this fellowship will enable you to achieve? It could be remaining in Europe, it could be going back to Japan. It's about mobility, but you need to think what this fellowship will enable you to do. Would it be an advantage to include a short stay or a placement or a secondment in the non-academic sector? If it makes sense for your projects, yes, it will be, because when it comes to proposals with equal scores, they will be looking at non-academic placements, secondments, short visits, and see how you move across sectors and disciplines. But only if it makes sense for your project. Don't include them because you think it will look nice and your evaluators will give you some extra points. So only do so if it makes sense for your project.
The next query, how can the gap in research be declared? And his other question is, how can we include non-academic placement in the budget table, expand the duration of the returning phase?
Okay, so in terms of how the research gaps can be declared, you use that your Part B2 to declare that. So you have your CV, that's where you include your CV and your track record. So any unconventional path that you took, whether you were on maternity leave, paternity leave, etc., that all is explaining your Part B2. At submission stage, you don't need to submit any documents, but the host organization that you're applying with will require you to prove and evidence that is part of their compliance, if you like, with the European Commission to make sure that you're an eligible researcher for this scheme. And what was the other question? In terms of non-academic placement, so the non-academic placement, it is encoded in Part A. So you need to include it in Part A, and that will automatically increase the duration and also the funding of your fellowship. For secondments, they don't need to be included in Part A. They just need to be described in Part B. So you will include that and explain the role of your supervisors, etc., in your Part B. So it's slightly different. So non-academic placement, which extend the duration and the funding in Part A and Part B. Secondments and short visits only in Part B.
Thank you. The next query, I would like to ask, if I resubmit my previous MSCA proposal, do I need to change the title? Will evaluators consider SOE?
So a proposal is considered a resubmission if you submit with the same host organization and is the same type of fellowship. So if you're applying for a European fellowship and you apply with a European fellowship with a UK host institution or with a host institution in the UK, it will be declared ineligible for resubmission. Now, if you apply for, you have the same project and your score less than 80%, but you want to move countries, you can apply with a host institution in France, for example, and that won't be declared a resubmission in the proposal. So you don't need to mark it as a resubmission. So the minute that you change institution or you change host institution or country, it won't be declared a resubmission. I don't know if that answers your question, but please feel free to expand if that's not what you meant. Sorry.
I think also the person asked, will they consider the seal of excellence if the person received the seal of excellence?
Now, the Seal of Excellence will enable, in some countries, they have a schemes in place that will attract Seal of Excellence awardees, but in that case, unfortunately, they won't be considering the Seal of Excellence. And there will be a new set of evaluators that will be reviewing your proposal. So you need to but you need to see your proposal with a fresh pair of eyes, really, not just focus on the evaluation summary report.
Thank you for the extensive answer on that. The next question, I'm interested in applying for a global fellowship. Are short stays with a tourist visa counted in the mobility rule? Also, are 12 months considered as 365 days? If I have resided in the country of the outgoing phase from September the 13th, 2023 to September the 1st, 2024, am I still eligible?
Okay,
it's very specific.
Two parts. Two parts on that question. To be eligible to apply for a global fellowship, you need to be an EU national, or you have to have resided in the country, European country or Horizon Europe associated country for at least 5 years prior to that. If you meet that requirement, the 12 months are considered as 365 days. So if you have lived in, let's say you are currently in the UK and you want to apply for a global fellowship with an outgoing phase to Japan, for example, if you have lived in Japan since the September 13th to September the 1st, 2024, you are eligible to apply because you are below the minimum threshold. So yes, you are, or the maximum, not the minimum threshold, but the maximum threshold. So yes, you are eligible to apply. But if you have any specific question, please feel free to email us and we can look into that into more detail.
Thank you. The next query. In Japan, students generally finish PhDs in March, and I'm now a PhD candidate. So could I apply for MSCA in this September during my last PhD year? What document or certificate is required to show my eligibility?
Yeah, if you have defended your thesis without any correction and your institution can certify that, even if your PhD is awarded later, you can submit the proposal. However, if you haven't received, if you haven't been awarded, or if you haven't received your PhD without they haven't confirmed that there are not minor corrections, therefore you are not eligible and you will need to wait for another year. So it really depends whether your institution can certify that you have been awarded a PhD without corrections, and therefore even though that your ceremony might be in March next year, that should be fine. But if they can't certify that because it hasn't been evaluated yet, therefore you will need to miss a year.
Yes, and even in that case, you're really not running out of time because you're eligible for several years after the completion of your PhD.
Indeed.
Okay, the next one. Is it allowed to participate in the fellowship while remaining affiliated with my current institution? In other words, is it allowed to allocate some of my effort to my current position during the fellowship period?
Okay, the fellowship is carried out on 100%, so you need to be dedicated full-time to your proposal or your fellowship. There are some exceptions to that rule. So, for example, if you want to start setting up a spin-out company, or if you're, for family reasons, you want to extend or work on part-time basis, you could request that to the European Research Executive Agency, but those are under exceptional circumstances. So on a normal basis is carried out full-time unless there are sufficient reasons to be otherwise.
Thank you. The next question, in particular, is it necessary to have publication in high-impact journals such as Cell, Nature, and their sister journals to be competitive?
It will really depend what makes you a competitive applicant in your field. It varies very much from social sciences to physical sciences to humanities. So what will make you stand out in your field? In some fields, it's not just a paper, it could be a book, it could be different. So it varies from disciplines. You don't have to have a publication in Nature, you don't have to have a publication. It's about being an excellent researcher in your field and how you can demonstrate that. It could be independent publication, it doesn't have to be in Nature as such. So the answer is not, you don't need to have that, but what makes you an outstanding researcher in your field is what you need to articulate in the proposal.
Thank you. I will answer the next question. Will there be similar MSCA related webinars or proposal preparation events in the future? If yes, how can we stay updated about upcoming events and opportunities? Thank you for the question. It's a great one. You might like to sign up for our newsletters via the EUROSAT Japan portal. You can click at the top. And you can also follow us on Twitter, which is X at the moment, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram. At the same time, I can surely say that there will be a grants in practice session in July, probably either the 15th or the 16th of July. It's a hybrid event. You can either do the practice online. There are 20 seats available and 20 on-site seats available in Tokyo, probably at the Goethe Institute. And we have 2 questions left. I'm a future MSCA Postdoctoral Fellowship applicant and have these questions. Is the application that we have to submit host CVs required as part of B2? Second question, is a letter of commitment from the host institution mandatory for European Fellowship? And the third query, are there any other documents or information that the host institution has to submit?
In terms of in Part B2, you as the researcher need to submit a CV and track record. That's part of the application. That's part of your Part B2, which remember doesn't have a page limit. So you need to include that. You don't need to include the CV of the supervisor or the host institution or anything like that. But you will describe in the capacity of the host organization, what do they have to offer, what infrastructure they have to offer, what supervision arrangement are in there. So you will include that in your Part B2. Now, letter of commitment. The letter of commitment is only a requirement for European fellowship, for global fellowship, not for European fellowship. So please do not include anything that is not required in the proposal, because if you include it and you spend time preparing it, it will be automatically disregarded. So please include just the information that you are required to submit. Are there any other documents or informations? No, the answer is no. The proposal template, if you go through that, is very prescribed and explains in detail what you need to include in this section. The other document that I will strongly recommend you to read is the handbook. The handbook is extremely useful. It's all the NCPs in Europe that get together and they put and explained in each of the sections what to include, and also strengths and weaknesses identified in previous proposals. So I will strongly recommend you to read that. The 2026 version is not yet available, but the 2025 is fairly similar. So I will strongly to have a look at that. It explains in a lot of detail what to include in each of the sections. So if you follow that through, I'm sure you will get to write a very strong proposal. So I think that's it. If you got any more question or any of those questions were not answered with my answers, please type it and then we can address that afterwards.
Yeah, we actually got a clarification. So it was, are there any other documents or information from the host institution that the applicant needs to submit? Yeah, so you've answered that perfectly. Okay. Thank you. The last question that we have time for. how to connect to possible host supervisor?
Good question. There are a few options that are available. Normally is people you know. So sometimes if you know a researcher that knows a researcher, it can help you to connect. Attendance to conferences or events is another way to connect. And the other option available is the Radiance matchmaking platform. So there is a platform that is created where you can post and you can identify and say, I'm interested in coming to any country in particular that you want to come to. But the other option as well, most institutions that look to attract postdoctoral fellowship, they have an internal selection process. So sometimes if you want to go, let's say, and work for Imperial College London, they normally have an internal selection process. So if you look at their page, it will explain you step by steps which departments are looking for postdoctoral fellows and how to submit and engage with potential supervisors. So it really depends. You've got a few options to explore. One is the Radiance matchmaking platform. Maybe we can add that onto the chat, Judith. And then the other option, attending to conference, people you know. So if you know anyone or your supervisor in Japan might know someone in Europe if you want to move. So talk to people and then tell them that you're interested in moving. LinkedIn is another venue to see options available. So look at all those options and see what's the best fit for your proposal.
We hope to see you in upcoming webinars and events. Thank you for your participation, and a special thanks to the speakers. Raquel, it has been great to have you here today.
Thank you very much for inviting me along. So thank you for today, and I hope you have a great day.
Thank you and goodbye.